Hi, I'm Tony DeLacy, and in this video I'd like to talk about how to avoid unnecessary suffering. If there's one thing that I can say unequivocally, thanks to the works of many people including Jordan Peterson, it is this: life is suffering. There is no way of avoiding that as a fact. Suffering will always come into our lives in ways that we can both maybe predict and not predict. It is part of life. You have to accept this. It is a difficult thing to accept. And for many people, they will choose many different ways of trying to avoid that simple fact. Nihilists will pretend that it doesn't exist, or that suffering is what doesn't really matter. Totalitarianists will try and stamp it out, and skeptics will question its validity or indeed its very existence. But there's no way of avoiding suffering, both necessary and unnecessary in a way, insofar as we will be given a situation in which we are expected to suffer. And it's that actually has led to people, for example, like me, into what can only be described as a lot of doubt about the world and about one's own existence. And it's one of the reasons, if not the main reason, for my depression all those years ago. So you have to accept that suffering is a part of life. And that's the hard bit. That's the hard bit. Hopefully the rest of this video will be very smooth sailing. But you're watching this video hopefully with a motivation of, okay, so if I accept this, and hopefully you do, hopefully you will accept that life is suffering. It's been a part of human existence for time immemorial. It's written heavily in the Bible. It's written everywhere. It's written in so many different cultures that to say that it doesn't exist is impossible. And ways of dealing with it, well, you only have to look at the entire 20th century to find out how people deal with that very fact that life is indeed suffering. So you're watching this saying, well, okay, be that as it may, what do I do? It's a very good question. What do you do in the face of so much suffering? In a phrase, you try to reduce it. Now, it's quite a big thing to say, because it's, how do you reduce the suffering of the world? Well, you accept, one, that suffering is going to happen, and you accept, two, your responsibility in your own life and for the suffering that comes your way. It's a very, very important thing to think about, responsibility of your own life. Because then if you can say that you're responsible, even for suffering where you feel that you have absolutely nothing to do with it, then you can do something about it if you feel responsible for it. It's perfect to think that. It might feel painful, but it's a way of at least accepting the fact. The way of accepting the fact that suffering exists is to then take responsibility for it, rather than being a victim or simply thinking that it doesn't exist. It does, and you can think of many ways in your own life that you can almost predict, or not predict, suffering taking place, or that has taken place in your own life. But when it comes to unnecessary suffering, well, the unnecessary suffering is what you can do about it once you've taken responsibility. It's the aftermath, so to speak, of that suffering. And the first thing you have to think about when saying, okay, well, how do I avoid unnecessary suffering is, well, let's take a look at you. And the question I'm going to ask you is, what is your highest value? What is your greatest value in your life? Is it to the betterment of yourself and others? Or is it something else? The reason you have to ask yourself that question is, if the motivation for your entire life and your highest moral value is the betterment of yourself and others around you, well then that's the motivation to reduce unnecessary suffering. If it isn't, well, what are you trying to pursue? Are you trying to pursue something meaningful or not? Are you trying to make the world better? Making yourself better first? Or is it something else? Ask yourself now, what is your highest moral virtue, your highest value that you've placed, your value structure that you've placed in your life? Everyone has one. And from it is derived a personality which you're living, ideas which you're the avatar for. So you have to decide. Decide what your highest value is in your life. And I can share you mine. This is my axiom that I live my life by. I will, to the best of my abilities, do everything in my power to reduce unnecessary pain and suffering, or to alleviate it. And that can be the same for you. And it can give to you a brand new personality, a brand new set of motivations, a brand new way of looking at the world, so to speak. But for that to happen, your old one, maybe your more expedient one, has to die first. And that's very easy to do. Look at what you're being motivated to at the moment. Is it something meaningful? Because what I just said, that's a meaningful way of existence. How do I know this? Because what's the opposite? A meaningless existence? When nothing matters? In the midst of so much suffering, nothing matters? Well, what kind of message to the world and to you is that? Of course it matters. What you might be experiencing, one of the reasons why you might have come to me and to this video is because if you perhaps ask that question to yourself honestly about what have you been pursuing all this time, has it been for something meaningful? Or is it for something expedient? Has it been for something short term? Has it been for something selfish? Has it been for something that is short term and you can get it? Because one of the big problems with that is expediency implies you know what you want and need. Do you? Do you really know what you want and what you really need? Because that's arrogance. It's arrogance to suggest that you know what you want and need and you're going to do everything in your power to get it. Which will probably include lying, being deceitful, hurting others in order to get what you want, going for the short term, sacrificing the future perhaps for the present. Is that what you're pursuing? Is that your value structure? Because if it is, well, we can understand your personality then, can't we? But if you're willing and open to say that actually maybe I was wrong, practice some humility, well then you can question these ideas and find that this personality is based on this value structure which you've either decided because everyone else is doing it or because that's the quickest and most expedient way of getting what you want. That could be the motivation for why you are how you are now, and perhaps you can discover there's a better value structure out there, which is, why don't I do something different? work for the betterment of myself and others, because expediency only gets you so far. But you'll always end up asking the questions of, what the hell am I doing with my life? Hell is right. See, it was in the 20th century, according to Solzhenitsyn in his book, The Gulag Archipelago, Volume 2, who said that the most important event of the 20th century was the Nuremberg trials, because it was there that it was declared across all cultures, and there was absolutely no hint of doubt that the horrors of the Nazis and everything was wrong, completely wrong to human nature. And that is unequivocal across cultures, people, time, everything. And it's from that we can find what the opposite is. If what we experienced in the 20th century was hell, then we know exactly what heaven is. So, what are you pursuing? Are you pursuing something more akin to hell or more akin to heaven in a way? Because what happened in the 20th century was meaningless suffering, unnecessary, meaningless suffering. And the opposite is meaningful, is trying to reduce suffering. And hopefully this is the motivation you need to say, maybe doing what's expedient, doing what can create unnecessary suffering, is sliding the world slightly back towards hell. So perhaps the motivation to do something meaningful is huge, because we can already recall the opposite. So why pursue something meaningful? Why pursue to try and reduce unnecessary suffering? It's because we know what happened when it was different. So hopefully you'll decide that you'll place meaning and trying to reduce unnecessary suffering for you and for others at the top of your value structure. Remove what you want to do and see as expedient, short-term, selfish, unnecessary, causing unnecessary suffering for others, taking responsibility. Because that pain is either going to be thrust more on you, or you're just going to thrust it onto someone else. Because that's unnecessary. So how do you avoid unnecessary suffering? Well, step 1, you change your value structure. You make it honest. You say, I am going to live working for ultimate good, trying to reduce pain and suffering. And that might take some sacrifice in the present. But we as humans are the only species to realize that sacrificing something in the present can make the future better. We are the only species in the world to have found this out. So why don't you? You know, it's hard to say what sacrifice you need to make in the present to make your and indeed other people's future better. Much like it's very easy to put value structures in, absolutely, but to find what's meaningful, it can't come, just like that. It doesn't happen like that. You tap yourself into alignment as you pursue what your values and your personality is pushing you towards. And you'll find meaning, and it'll tap you into alignment as you go ahead. And you'll find what you need to sacrifice now, so that you can achieve what may happen later on. and it'll be better for you. It's guaranteed that your future is going to be better because of it, and others around you. What other motivation can you get? And that's so exciting. Carl Jung said that when you create a value system, your highest value, well, that is your God. That is your highest potential. Your highest purpose is God, and the opposite is Satan. So if you pursue trying to reduce unnecessary suffering, well, then you accept that the wrong way to live is by giving out unnecessary suffering, which is, funnily enough, what people do all over the world these days. They may not know it, they may not realize it, but that's what they're doing. And if you realign your value system, not only will you be able to live, but you'll see other people and where they are in that sort of spectrum, in that sort of value structure. And you'll be able to attribute where people are in terms of maturity, say, but in terms of what they're doing in the world. Well, that's so exciting. You'll be able to see the world, if you're honest, if you're willing to pay attention, to open your eyes, and to see things for what they really are. Well, you won't be blind anymore to the world and the suffering that exists within it. And you'll know how to reduce suffering to the best of your ability. And one of the cardinal rules about this is tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Never lie about anything. I know that sounds obvious, and we were taught this as kids, but never lie. Lying only increases unnecessary suffering. I mean, I don't want to spend more time on it, but because that's really obvious, but just, well, don't lie for sure. Treat yourself like you matter. Because you do. Treat yourself as if you want to better yourself. And better yourself alone. And compare yourself only to who you were yesterday, rather than someone else today. And it very much starts from the beginning, starts from the self, but as you go on into the world, then if you know how to look after yourself properly, honestly, you'll then look after other people, honestly. You are the blueprint, you are the template of how you look after things and how you reduce suffering around the world, or in the vicinity you can do at the moment. The vicinity that you are in. And that's really important, especially to think about. So you look at all the unnecessary suffering that's in your life, for example. Again, using you as a blueprint, even if it's insignificant. Say it's that stack of papers that you haven't been looking at for a while. Say it's that work that you've not really taken a look at. Say it's that event in your past that you haven't quite ironed out yet, and you haven't quite thought about and you haven't quite learned from yet. And you don't have to do it all now. You don't have to say, right, look at all that stack of papers I have to do. You can take that physically and you can take that as a concept. You don't have to do it all now, but if you take 7 pages of it, of this, let's say 100 pages of what's going wrong in your life right now, take 7 pages and do those today. Well, that's 7 pages less than you have to do tomorrow. Don't take on the responsibility of everything going wrong in your life immediately. reduce the damn responsibility until it's tolerable, and then go on towards it. And then sort it out. Take out those 7 pages. Take out the unnecessary suffering in your life, because you know you can do something about it. Unnecessary suffering is things that you can do, you can sort out. Unnecessary suffering is things that you can fix. And aim low at this time, because you can't do everything at once. But you can start, and you can reduce those 100 pages, 7 pages at a time each day. Because once you've completed it, then you can start tackling other things going on around you. Your family, your friends, your loved ones, and society. Because in order to reduce unnecessary suffering around others, you first have to get your own house in order before you criticize and try to restructure things around you. Unfortunately, a lot of people skip that bit. They skip fixing themselves, and in that they start to create their own pathologies about how they treat other people, because they haven't looked at themselves. They try to, what they believe is reduce unnecessary suffering, which probably is quite expedient and will probably involve lying, deceit, and pain along the way. Those are the people to look out for, because they've forgotten to reduce the unnecessary suffering in their own lives first. And they haven't learned the skill. They only think they have. And that's not honest. They're lying to themselves and you. And you can probably think of maybe 1 or 2 people in your inner circle, say, who probably do that. And you probably think of people on TV, maybe, who are in that mode as well. You focus on yourself, reduce the unnecessary suffering by looking at what you're doing wrong, what your value structure is, whether you're pursuing the ultimate good, whether you're pursuing meaning in your life, or trying to find out the meaning of your life by pursuing the ultimate good, by sacrificing things in the present for the future, for a better future. By sorting out all the things that you need to do that you haven't been doing. Even if it's as small as cleaning your room. Even if it's as small as making sure that you're dressed properly. You start at the small and then you build up. You don't lie. Not least to yourself. But don't lie in anything. And take on the responsibility that you really should be doing. And one of the greatest responsibilities? Well, it starts from the good book. It was Jesus who took on the responsibility of the world upon his shoulders. Now, what does that mean? Well, we all can't be like Christ. But we can learn from his teachings, and that is take on the responsibility of the fact that you are capable of causing so much suffering. You are. If there's anything history has ever taught me, is that the people of great evil, especially in the 20th century, weren't evil megalomaniacs. They were human beings. You are just as capable, by the fact that you are human, of causing the same amount of suffering that happened in the 20th century. Taking on the responsibility of the world, of existence, implies taking on the responsibility of the fact that you have the potential to cause so much suffering. And so what do? The opposite. That's how to atone and to remember the awful experiences that the human race has ever experienced. You do the opposite. Instead of causing unnecessary suffering to innocent people, you reduce suffering for yourself and others. You reduce the pain of existence for yourself and others. Because what nobler way of living is there? What better way of living is there? Do you have a better way of living? Or are you focused on getting what you want and what you need? That is, if you know what you want and need. Because you probably don't. In fact, I'm almost certain that you don't. Because it was T.S. Eliot who says that we shall not cease from exploration, and at the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we began, where we started, and to know the place for the first time. If you haven't explored, if you haven't made the conscious decision to go, I don't know what I want and need, and you explore, you'll arrive back to where you are perhaps now and realize, I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what I needed. I didn't realize my value structure. I didn't realize the idea that I was embodying. I didn't realize the personality that I was showing to the world. I didn't realize about so much honesty and truth that was actually out there that I was not seeing. Be humble in who you are now, because it will open you up to the very necessary exploration that you need to find in order to find meaning, in order to break down the wrong ideas that you have right now in your life to say, actually, I don't know what is best for me. And then you will be able to kill off the idea that might be embodying you at the moment, which is, I want to get what I want. I want what is expedient. It is humility that opens you up to a new idea, a more honest idea of trying to make yourself and the world a better by reducing the pain and suffering that comes along with life. By fighting back against malevolence that is existing all around us, with people who are way more towards the more the area that creates suffering. There are a lot more people who are in that area. And this video is saying, well, be on the other side, or fight back. Because what greater value structure is there than trying to reduce pain and suffering for yourself and others in the world? Because then you know that is the kingdom of God in your eyes, and as Carl Jung says, that will be your God. But then you know what Satan is. Then you know the people who are more following that sort of style. And you'll see, honestly, the world, existence, yourself. How do you reduce pain and suffering? You start living the life that pursues it. That pursues the attempt to the best of your ability, your own individual ability. It tries to reduce suffering and pain around you. And to me, there is no more nobler way of living. And you will feel excited for the future as you sacrifice for the present. As you sacrifice the present, the future will get better. And you'll live properly, with goodness at the forefront, and being one of the very special people who fights back against pain and suffering, unnecessary pain and suffering along the way. Thank you.